Hi there. So I'm David Moule. I'm Chief Executive of Exemplars, and I'm delighted to have my colleague Chandila with us today, really to talk about his knowledge, understanding of raising money, supporting, growing, scaling SMEs, particularly innovative business that we work with, just to talk about his observations and experiences of working with clients within his portfolio. Chandila.
Thank you very much, David. I'm Chandila Fernando. I work on the West Midlands team for the Innovate UK contract, and I'm best described as being the guy that goes to ask for money from people who don't necessarily want to hand it over.
So, Chandila, you work with a number of companies looking to scale, grow, innovative companies that are doing really exciting things. You hear a lot of talk in the market, in the press, about the state of liquidity and raising finance in the UK. What's your observation from the clients that you work with in terms of how easy or difficult it is to raise money and what the current state of the market feels like to you?
I mean, industry commentators are all talking about it being difficult. There is, without question, the examples that, people can raise money. I mean, in my portfolio and in colleagues' portfolios, you've got fintechs, you've got regtechs, you've got a variety of businesses, depending on the stage, that can raise money. That said, we are in a global downturn. We do have unprecedented geopolitical volatility, plain English, lots of things going on, various nefarious actors across the world. So people who are sitting on the fancy term dry powder, in other words, money to deploy, are thinking twice. We are in an election cycle. So at some stage, the Prime Minister will go to the polls. So prior to that, any major strategic decisions, people are sort of reticent to make those. You can also see the British Business Bank from last year's figures did suffer a loss. So there is a consideration in terms of the overriding portfolio and all the delivery partners that they actually support in terms of equity. Debt, well, cost of capital is expensive, interest rates are high. But I think there is probably a greater challenge, which is that historically in the UK, we have faced this issue of the first 500,000 and then subsequently the 1 to 5 million being very difficult. No one has really fully addressed that. Yes, there are people who are screaming and shouting about the Mansion House Pact, the Chancellor getting onto the front foot and persuading pension funds to really, push those allocations and go out there. But that's really at the very high end of the market. So you're, in plain English, you're saying companies that are Series A and beyond. What we are really dealing with is highly innovative businesses that are on their journey to Series A. So at that particular point, David, you have significant challenges, and that can be businesses that are burning an excessive amount of money or having to rationalize how much they can actually burn. And then relative, for example, you take SaaS-based businesses, software as a service, where it's dependent on a subscription. Then you've got companies turning around and saying, well, I'm not prepared to sign a 3-year agreement. I might sign a 6-month agreement. I might say, well, you can give me your solution and then let's work out some kind of arbitrage play. For want of a better word, a percentage of money saved being accumulated over a calendar year to then put that towards an investment. So I think from my perspective and that of speaking to colleagues, it is harder to raise money. Angel investors historically have been difficult outside the Golden Triangle, namely London, Oxford and Cambridge. And on top of that, the usual suspects in terms of the venture capitalists and established funds that all have, consolidated funds from people like the British Business Bank. To a large extent, they know what they're going to deploy in the next 12 to 18 months because those capital commitments are effectively contingent upon that pipeline. How does that impact us? How does that impact an IGS or a scale-up director or anyone in this ecosystem? You are effectively in the business of kissing frogs. So anyone who doesn't have a thick skin and is not able to do that, both as somebody who's supporting the business and the business itself, struggles. I think the other thing I would also say, it's about, smart work. It sounds such a cliche, but too many clients get out there and start sending their material to everybody and anyone in the hope that something will stick somewhere. I think you have to rationalize that. And third thing is you have to be cognizant of your audience. I mean, this particular time is difficult. I would perhaps, like you, David, probably old enough to remember 2008, 2009. That was a very difficult time to raise money. Credit markets were, for want of a better word, asleep or just not functioning. And I think that's really where we, in terms of the work that we do with clients, you've got to manage that expectation. You've got to say, okay, look, This isn't as easy as it used to be. We're not in the 2020, sort of 2019, 2020, skyrocketing valuations, go for growth, it doesn't really matter. We don't care how much money you burn. And also, we are very different to America and continental Europe. Politicians do, of all political persuasions, run around this idea that we have lots of unicorns in the UK. That is true, relative to the population size of technology companies. And I think that's where we have, as a business and as a service for Innovate UK, got to articulate to people, say, okay, look, this is the landscape. These are the things you need to be mindful of. And just because you do an investability program or you do something investment readiness related is by no means a guarantee to success. And things like the London Stock Exchange partnership with Innovate, the program flow, the jury's out.
So Chandila, just picking up on what you said in terms of particularly possibly that pre-Series A, Series B financing, that earlier stage, do you think we, private sector, are missing a trick in terms of are there any other financial products, vehicles that could facilitate that difficulty in that stage of finance to enable businesses, or do you think it's just a difficult backdrop, difficult market, and most of those instruments are in place?
Fair question. I would say, you have to keep, it's a tautology almost, you have to keep innovating. The financial products exist, they're largely vanilla. It's the way you deliver them. And at what stage? So for example, if you take venture debt as a product, which is effectively additional working capital over and above an investment, which is typically allocated to a company at Series A. So somebody who's doing at least 3 million and above, for example. Could that work for a business that, let's say, isn't making a profit, but let's say posting 500,000 in revenue? The answer is yes, it could. But it's then the underlying guarantees that support that decision. And then off the back of that, what are you doing in terms of A, due diligence, B, ongoing management, and C, if you take within even an angel investor's portfolio, let's assume they've got a series of bets from 10,000, 50,000, 250,000, just a complete spread bet, for want of a better word. How much actual time is spent on looking after those individual businesses, or for want of a better word, much like the Bank of England, what's your forward guidance on your portfolio? As to what point do you think you're going to have some form of loss arbitration? Or have you taken the view that, okay, this 1.5, 2 million, it's a tax problem for me, so great, as an angel investor, why not, I'll burn it on something, better than a Ferrari and a new home in the Caribbean. Why don't I have a go at this? That's one. For the institutions, though, I think the way people raise their money and the way they then go and subsequently deploy it, it's almost as if you don't have to innovate that piece. There is no need to. Term sheet, due diligence, everything. It's so formulaic. Say that, okay, well, I'm successful, why do I need to reinvent the wheel? And I think the other thing, which, again, perhaps an indictment is too strong a word. You've got to appreciate that if people are doing something in one particular way, and they have done, and that's conventional wisdom, there doesn't appear, despite all these disruptive technology-based ventures, which focus, for example, on fintech, where banks have effectively stepped out of the market, there isn't an overwhelming desire to be that disruptive in funding. That's the piece. If someone could say, a politician will often say, or even a policy maker at ground level will say, look, we need to democratize the access to venture capital. We need to have angel investors beyond Junction 5 on the M1. Yeah, you can, and they exist, but why would they be interested in this when they can make 5 or 7% on their property portfolio or their ETF or whatever that is? And I think that bit is lost. I'm sure UK Business Angels and various other groups will say, no, we have a very healthy angel investor network, but I would say, yes, you probably do, but then with anything it's access, and who gets that access? And I think that's the other piece that we should never forget or lose sight of, which is that 2% of venture capital goes into either funds or businesses run by women. which is a shocking statistic, which has been around for far too long. And secondly, it gets worse when you start looking at neurodivergent communities or people from underrepresented backgrounds. Then it's, did you go to the right school? Who was your dad? Who was your mum? Or who's your family? Did one of your parents work for a blue chip? And then you're suddenly going down a route where it's pretty difficult.
So Chandila, a huge thank you for me. I mean, as always, great insight, real understanding of the market need. Never shy of being provocative in terms of challenging the status quo, but always to the betterment of the SME and the clients that you're looking to work with, trying to get the best outcome for them. So a huge thank you for your time this afternoon.
Thank you very much, David.